Hi everybody, so let's dive a little bit deeper into appetite, hunger, and metabolism. This is going to be a little bit of a long one, so hang tight with me. So kind of what was found, and these are from a few studies that have been done, and again, this is all from the book Good Calories, Bad Calories that I'm doing. We have one more week with that book, and then we will have a new one, a little bit more on gut health. So that's going to be a little bit more in depth too, starting off on the second week of April. But there were a bunch of studies done. They're done on mainly men and rats. But this is kind of what happened with those studies and what people had found with those studies. So the metabolism of obese patients seemed to run as fast, if not faster, than anyone else's in any other study. Just because you have more mass to you, that normally actually means that you have a pretty high metabolism and that your metabolism isn't slowing down. Again, that is unless you have a thyroid issue. The obese tend to expend more energy than lean people of comparable nature, which means their metabolism is typically burning off more calories because when people grow fat, their lean body mass also increases to be able to hold the fat. So you're also a lot stronger than you think that you are as well. This led to the natural assumption that obese people must eat more than the lean, which is not the case. We don't want to confuse association with causation at all, because that's literally not the case. Most of the time, we see that overweight and obese people actually eat a lot less than those of a leaner size. So that, again, is a no, not the case. An obese person who maintains their weight indefinitely is actually going to be in a caloric equilibrium. So there's that homeostasis that our body's always looking for. And it's just the same as any person of any normal weight at maintenance. If you're at maintenance, you're at maintenance, and that's it. That means you are equal. That means that your body's happy in homeostasis. It's normally a weight to find. Like if you keep constantly going up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down, there's probably a weight there that's in the middle of that's going to be your happy medium. It's going to be your homeostatic state. And it may not be the weight that you want it to be, but it is the weight that your body is happy at. So keep that in mind too. Overeating, though it is observed with great regularity, is not the cause of obesity. It is a symptom of an underlying disturbance. Again, do not confuse causation and association. Different. The first law of thermodynamics dictates that weight gain, the increase in energy stored as fat and lean muscle tissue, will be accompanied by or associated with positive energy balance, but it does not say that it is caused by a positive energy balance. So also keep that in mind, because a lot of times where, we say calories in, calories out, when people think about weight loss. Not necessarily the case, because again, causation and association are not necessarily the same thing. But we have to also remember that children don't grow because they eat a lot. Like we know that kids and teenagers eat a ton of food because they're growing. We don't account that to weight gain. It's just to general growth. Like they eat that way, again, because they're growing. They require excess calories to satisfy the requirements of that growth, resulting in a positive energy balance. And that growth is induced by hormones, particularly growth hormones. So if that's off at all, that could also be a reason potentially as to why you eat more. Both hunger and sedentary behavior can be driven by metabolic hormonal disposition to grow fat. Just as lack of hunger and the impulse to engage in physical activity can be driven by a metabolic hormonal disposition to burn calories rather than store them. The more protein digested over the amount necessary to maintain tissues and organs, the greater the heat generation. So excessive calories losses heat in the process of either digestion or working out or whatever, and utilizing protein cannot then be stored as fat or used for fuel. An effort to conserve enough energy to maintain a constant internal balance. So again, homeostasis, bodies love it. When it's out of whack, you are aware of it. When we are well nourished, an individual tends to become more energetic. It's quite possible that they will actually burn up their stored fat by extra work or exercise, which would not have been undertaken had it not been for the overfeeding in the first place. If we consume less food than we might require to replenish our reserves, and the amount of heat generated in response to a meal is minimized, and the stores of carbs, fats, and proteins are used to make up the difference. Should the caloric deficit continue, the result is a gradual lowering of metabolism. So that's when I talk about reverse dieting, and a tendency toward restriction of activities due to lack of energy and initiative. So again, if you're not fueling your body, if you're not feeding your body, you're not going to be able to do the things that you want to do every day. Eat more to lose weight, eat more to gain muscle, to lose body fat. It's really always going to be, you always want to fuel your body. We should not be in a calorie deficit ever. At least not the ones that we are currently in. Remember, 2,000 calories a day is the minimum, not the maximum. So if you're not there, get there in a good way, not by eating Doritos. The notion, let's talk about hunger, that hunger can be relieved or eliminated simply by limiting choice of food is exceedingly difficult to embrace. If you're hungry, you're hungry. You're going to eat what's there. So weight loss can also be largely independent of caloric consumption. So can hunger. An obese individual will spend much of their life in an energy balance in the static phase of obesity, just as the lean do. So that was when I talked about if you're at maintenance and you're not gaining and you're not losing, but you're just at a steady, let's just throw out 330 pounds, and you're there and you're stagnant, you are still in an energy balance at that weight. So keep that in mind. When obese individuals try consciously to eat less, when they go on a low-calorie diet, their metabolism and energy expenditure inevitably decrease, just as they do when lean individuals are semi-starved. So it's the same thing. Like if you're not fueling your body, if you're not giving it what it needs, it's going to cause trouble. You need to fuel your body. Remember, weight loss or even muscle gain and fat loss is a slow process. It takes time. On a calorie-restricted diet, regardless of weight status, your tissues are not receiving enough nutrient at all. They're not being nourished, and you need them to be in order to run your systems. Another way to phrase this is that anything that induces fatty acids to escape from the fat tissue and then be burned as fuel will promote satiety by providing fuel to the tissues. That's kind of how it works. That's how fat burns off in other things, and then you expel it actually through your exhaling breath. So deep breathing, also very helpful for fat loss. The physiological notion of hunger as a response to the availability of internal fuels and to the hormonal mechanisms of fuel partitioning. So you may be hungry because your tissues aren't fed, because your organs aren't fed. A lot of times we find that in people that are on severe calorie restriction. So those people eating 1,200, 1,300, 1,400, 1,500 calories a day, that's a huge restriction. And a lot of people then end up binging later at night or on the weekend, or I'm good during the week, but I'm bad on the weekends, those type of people. We just want to erase, again, the good and the bad notion. But that's the reasoning behind kind of like hunger. If we're not fueling our body correctly, you will keep eating until the body gets what it needs out of whatever it is. So if your body needs protein and you're giving it a carb, it's still going to keep wanting to eat until it gets that protein or those amino acids. So weight stability is nothing more than an equilibrium between the fatty acids flowing into the energy buffer of the fat tissue and the fatty acids flowing out. So if you have more flowing in and less flowing out, you're going to have more fat. If you have the same amount, you're going to be in that maintaining equilibrium, that homeostasis. If you have more, that's where you're going to see the weight loss. The body regulates the fuel to flow those cells. Satiety and weight loss will be promoted by factors that increase the release of fatty acids from the fat tissue and direct them to the cells of the tissues and organs to be oxidized. So that's also going to lower your insulin levels. It's also going to be the main fuel for your body when we talk about doing workouts and doing all of that. That's where that fuel comes from. Foods that supply calories and other nutritional requirements quickly and efficiently will come to be perceived as tasting good, and so we learn to prefer those over other things. It's not so much also that fat fills us up. Carbs prevent satiety, so we remain hungry, because what happens is, so carb cravings are associated with obesity, one. Chronic hyperinsulinemia, so the insulin induces hunger or prevents satiety even between meals. So say you eat a carb, your insulin's going to skyrocket, your blood sugar is going to skyrocket after the fact, which is why sometimes when you eat and you eat a whole meal and you're like, oh man, I'm more hungry now than when I started. That's what's happening. As far as the body's concerned, the elevated insulin is an indication that you've just eaten. And it'll drop quickly because we know with quick carbs, it's up, down, up, down, up, down. So it's initial, but you need all those other things. You need the fiber, the protein, the fat to really make sure that you have those complete meals in order for this not to happen. So that's a little bit, or a lot of it, honestly, on appetite, hunger, and metabolism. Again, next week, we'll finish out the good calories, bad calories series, and then we will dive into a little bit more gut health